This week's theme is... I'm pretty sure I might get flagged by YouTube, but well, my whole channel is not yet qualified to get monetized, so who cares? This week's theme is suicide. It's not just plucked out to satisfy morbid interest though, because the suicide rate is unusually high in South Korea. Throughout post-2000, among 38 OECD nations, South Korea recorded about twice as higher than the average suicide rate, between 30 to 20 per 100,000 people. Discussing the reason of the unfortunate trend is a complex matter, but I think one of the main forces is the sheer intensity of Korean society as a whole. I already mentioned it in my disaster episodes, but the journey from one of the poorest nations to the current industrial power in a half a century was certainly not for free. There had been great dynamism and social mobility, but it inevitably called for intensely hard work and competition from early age. With improving but still not enough social safety net and the typical Asian groupism constantly forcing people to measure themselves in comparison to others, Korea is definitely a high-stress society where winners and losers are harshly defined. A sad flip side of its success story. Today's stories are looking at suicide issues from paranormal perspective. The basic idea about suicide in Korean shamanism is already discussed in detail in my episode 122. Basically, killing yourself cannot set you free from the trouble you are trying to run away from. On the contrary, your spirit would get stuck exactly in the situation and repeat the painful process time after time. Most of today's stories definitely follow the same line of notion. As a disclaimer, if you are sensitive about the stories and images of death and suicide, this episode is most definitely not for you. So, here are 7 allegedly true stories about suicide and its aftermath. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by a host, Anthony. More than 40 years ago, my mom went to a sort of boarding school that had a high reputation in her region. When she was in the first year, there was a little scandal. A second-year student had a crush on one of young teachers. Time was much more conservative then, and it was absolutely out of question that her desperate longing be allowed, let alone reciprocated. In despair, this girl went up to the hill behind the school one rainy night and swallowed sleeping pills. And in that same evening, in my mom's dorm room were 5-6 girls gathered together to play a card game, except for one roommate who claimed she was too tired and went to bed early. While the girls were lost in the game, they heard the hallway door to their floor opening. It was well past the official bedtime, and they feared if the house mistress was on patrol. They quickly turned off the light and listened out. They heard something scratching or brushing on the floor, and then silent again. Maybe it was a rat or something. Girls resumed their game, but then somebody knocked on the door so loud that even the roommate who was sleeping woke up. Of course, it created a short frenzy in the room, turning off the light, sweeping the card under the bed, jumping into bed pretending to sleep. And it was the roommate who just woke up that went to open the door, still half asleep and not quite grasping the situation. And when she opened the door, she fainted on the spot with not so much of a squeak. Because at the door was a girl with blood forming from her mouth Her eyes half rolled back and her face and hair caked with mud. It was the girl who tried to kill herself in the hill. She woke up with searing pain and desperately dragged herself through the mud pit back to the dorm to ask for help. The biggest irony was, the girl was sent to emergency and eventually resuscitated, while Mom's roommate, who opened the door to her, died. Her heart stopped with a sheer shock. I was 17 then. If my memory is correct, it was a Saturday on a bright summer day. My family lived in a typical high-rise apartment block facing another similar apartment complex. Mom was preparing lunch and I was setting the table, and I saw something falling down from the apartment in the neighboring block. I first thought it might be a washing or perhaps a blanket somebody hung out dry, but the heavy, dull pop that followed, I still thought it was just something heavy fallen down, but when I looked out of the balcony, on the ground was a person, literally crumpled down. I don't know why, but it took a few hours before an ambulance came. For all those hours, the body was just left there. Somebody did cover it up with a white sheet, but I clearly remember the red stain that slowly spread over it. I didn't miss the evening news that day, hoping to find out more details about the death and the situation. But there was no report. I hear he was a grown-up man, had some quarrel or fight, and jumped off, Mom commented. How do you know? I asked. Well, people talk, you know. Residents of that block are anxious to keep it quiet because that's already the third case of suicide from that block alone, Mom said. I was vaguely aware of that too, though the previous ones I didn't get to witness firsthand as this one. All very tragic, but I quickly forgot about it all soon too. A few days later, I was on my way back home late after spending some time at a friend's. Near the entrance to my apartment building, I walked past somebody who was walking before me, and as I walked up the steps to the entrance, I dropped my file and had to step down to gather the scattered papers. And then I saw somebody following the person I just walked past. He was limping, and his neck was bent to a side in an unusual angle. I just assumed he must be disabled or something. A few more days later, I was on my way out for a walk and saw my younger sister coming from school. I was about to wave at her, but then I saw a middle-aged woman walking in front of my sister, followed by the same man with a bent neck. In bit brighter light, now I could see clearly that he couldn't be alive. He was covered with a sticky blood all over. Hey, what are you looking at? Meanwhile, sister came up and asked, Did you see too? A strange-looking guy following the lady in front of you? I said. Huh? There was nobody else other than the lady. Okay. Sister must have detected my funny expression and kept asking what was wrong. In the end, I had to tell her about the guy with the bent neck. To my surprise, my sister took it knowingly. So, that's why I smelled something funny, metallic and incensey emanate from her, my sister said. The man kept appearing around. Some kids in the neighboring block also reported that they witnessed the same guy. He would be following the same lady, and I once heard him saying, "I'm gonna take you with me." The lady had a little boy, and the man was seen following the boy around too. In the following weeks, I heard the boy was pushed to a running car by something and was hospitalized, and that the lady called in a shaman for a ritual, but I don't think it had worked. Still, I see him around the apartment block to this day. I was a middle school student then. My school faced an apartment block which I walked past by every morning on the way to school. One day, we were out on the school playground for a PE class, and I saw something falling off from the 10 or higher floor of the apartment building. I asked other mates if they saw it too, but they said they didn't, or brushed it off as some clothes or newspaper. The thing was, it kept happening whenever we had a PE class. I remember it was in Thursday afternoons. I paid close attention and concluded it was a girl in a school uniform. I even figured out the uniform should be that of a high school nearby. The daughter of my neighbor attended a very high school, so I asked if there was any student from the school who recently killed herself, but she denied any such a case. Well, could have been a uniform of different school, but then if somebody jumped off from the apartment, wouldn't there have been a news or at least a rumor around the neighbors? Was I overthinking or a hallucination? But during another PE class, a classmate screamed, Sir, somebody fell from the apartment!" And another mate joined in, "Yes, sir, I saw it too." The PE teacher ended up calling the police, and there was some stir. But turned out, nobody fell. Everything clean. The teacher was royally pissed and reprimanded the two classmates harshly. I later talked to them about what they saw, and their account matched my observation too. I was sure now it wasn't just my hallucination. But soon the year ended and the timetable shifted with it. There was no occasion to be out on the playground on Thursdays, and I didn't get to see the weird phenomenon anymore. One day, I and some classmates were on the way to one of their homes to do our group assignment. Her home was in the apartment block facing our school, and I didn't realize it then, but it was a Thursday afternoon. Some of mates made a stop at the corner shop on the way to pick some snacks, while I and a couple of others waited outside. I heard a sharp noise of something heavy crushing down, and with it, something spraying on my face. I instinctively knew it couldn't be anything good, but couldn't help myself from turning to look at it at the same time. There was a person crushed down on the ground. I recognized the uniform as that of the high school nearby. Her face was crushed in, and I rather think that I couldn't see the details because everything was covered with scarlet red. I looked at other mates standing next to me, but they were just nonchalantly chatting away with each other. Clearly didn't see what I saw.
Come join me. Let's jump off together.
Something whispered in my ear, and I turned to look, which I regret. Just a few centimeters away from my own face was the crushed, mangled, bloody face. Eyes almost popped out of the sockets, the nauseating smell of warm blood. I was trembling all over, but somehow managed to say firmly, "No." Her mangled lips seemed to smirk, then turned around and dragged her twisted body to the entrance of the apartment. Right before she disappeared into the building, she turned around and said,
"You don't know how exciting this is."
Later I entered the same high school of the dead girl myself, and learned about the girl who was abused by her parents from years back, who, one day during another beating from her parents, just threw herself off the balcony. Now I'm an adult and don't get to pass by the apartment regularly anymore, but when I happen to, I still see her occasionally, falling from the apartment with a chilling smirk. How sad and how terrible. Back in 1990s, among the residents of the apartment building my family lived in was a rumor, a taboo. Avoid going to the 8th floor after dark, and not to look out the small bathroom window at night. It all goes back to the two women who used to live on the 8th floor and ended their lives together. Both were so-called service girls working at a bar. They were found good 2 months after. Their remains were, of course, decomposed beyond recognition. In the last will they left were their apology to their family and how hard they tried to live and make living. But the most chilling part was the last sentence.
"We are going to stay here with you all."
Apparently, they were under a lot of pressure from the neighbors. People were not happy about the service girls as their neighbor, that it was neither good for the reputation of their property nor a good influence for their kids. So the women became the subject of various bullying, people hissing at them, writings on their door, or garbage thrown in front of their apartment. It was not difficult to speculate that such hostile environment must have played a role in their decision to end it all. But their death wasn't the end of the story. Since when rumors started going around that residents saw a faceless woman passing by outside their bathroom window, which sat over good 2 meters high from the floor. Some kids who witnessed the apparition even showed the signs of PTSD. Also, at the staircase hall to the 8th floor, some people using the stairs reported having seen a woman hanging from the ceiling. Or at nights, the elevator would stop at the 8th floor even though the passenger didn't call for it. Residents were all in the state of constant panic, and some decided to move away in the end. But most suffered it in silence because they feared the price of their property should fall should the rumor circulate around. Now the apartment is demolished for redevelopment, but I still don't look out the window at night and get tense when the elevator I take passes 8th floor.
"We are going to stay here with you all."
What could have the two women been feeling and thinking? when they wrote it to finish their last will. It's from when I was 15. In my town was a small department store that is now out of business. The store was deep in trouble from the get-go. The construction company that built the department store went bankrupt, and the owner of the company killed himself. He set up his office on the 6th floor of the building during the construction, and he was found there, hung dead. He was a pretty well-known figure in that small town as a successful businessman, so the story of his tragic end was the talk of the town for a while. The department store managed to open somehow, but the business was already on the brink of bankruptcy, and unlike the original plan, many floors were let to various other businesses like a cram school, pizza restaurant, billiard room, and so on. And when I was 15, I and some mates attended a cram school there. That particular day, I and my mates gathered up at the staircase hall of the building to practice playing recorders. We were to have a test at the music class the following day. That was after the lessons at the cram school, so it must have been already past 10 at night. Not long after, the teacher of the cram school came out and told us to find other place, that the noise disturbed the lessons for others. We still needed to practice, and came up with the idea to go up the rooftop. So 5 of us went up, pushed a heavy creaking door open. The rooftop was just a barren, dark space. None of the boys said anything, but I guess we all felt it a bit spooky. So we all stayed near the door, 3 facing the front, and I and one other mate around the corner, playing recorders loudly.
Hey, what's that? Something's floating!
Mates facing the front suddenly shouted. I looked towards the front. Indeed, there seemed to be something. But I'm a bit short-sighted and wasn't sure, or maybe didn't want to accept it. What? I don't see anything, I said.
Yes, there is. Look closer. At the clothesline.
Mates insisted. Maybe some clothes hung to dry, I said.
Are you blind? It's not hanging on the line at all.
Now, I got more curious than anything else. Yet it indeed was a bit spooky, so I asked a mate next to me to join me to go and check it out closer. He insisted he didn't see anything and didn't want to go. But I simply headlocked him and dragged towards the clothesline. About 10 steps towards. Now I could see whatever it was, a bit clearer. On the clothesline were mop heads hung to dry, and behind them was standing somebody facing away from me. A few steps closer. Somehow my instinct was telling me to stop, goosebumps popping all over. Yet my feet kept moving forwards as if by their own will. Suddenly the friend I was dragging with me jumped and shook, shouting, "Let go! Let go!" He pushed me away and ran to the door, screaming like a madman. Soon the other 3 joined him screaming and ran inside too. I didn't know what was going on. Why were they all running like headless chickens? I instinctively looked back, and the figure standing was now looking back at me. His face, eyes bulged almost out of the sockets, messy hair with bald spots, and a clear black line of bruise across his throat. I ran. Everything felt so unreal, not even my own feet sprinting or heart jumping. My friend screamed. I couldn't even breathe, let alone scream. Those few seconds I had to wrestle to open the damn rusty metal door felt like forever. I ran down the stairs till I found my mates huddled together at a staircase well. The mate I had locked and dragged along were crying, collapsed on the floor. You son of bitches! You ran away leaving me alone! And you are the worst! You pushed me to that thing! I shouted. The panic bursted out as an anger. The crying mate said between his sobs, "You don't know what I saw. I was looking down because you were dragging me headlocked, and I saw his legs. They weren't touching the ground. They were floating, and the skin on the legs were all rot and melting down too." I swear to God, I'm stating as it happened. I still occasionally meet these mates, and the instant always comes back when we have a drink together. In my first year in high school, we changed our seats in the classroom every month, and everyone who sat at that particular seat would all complain they got stiff shoulders. It was the last seat of the second row from the window. I myself never got to sit there because I was always given a front seat due to my poor eyesight. One day, as I stood up to go to the toilet during a recess, and the mate who was taking the seat in question was taking a nap with her head on the desk, and I saw some white shadow on her shoulders. Now, believe it or not, I do have the third eye, and sometimes see spirits and ghosts. But it was so faint and soon disappeared, so I didn't think much of it then. That same afternoon, I realized I didn't have the textbook ready for the class, so rushed to my cabinet at the back of the classroom just as the teacher walked in. But I stopped short on the way back to my seat because I saw feet on the same mate's shoulder. I had to take my seat because the class started, but I couldn't help myself from constantly looking back at the mate. She massaged her own shoulder. No wonder, when the ghostly feet were constantly stomping on them. The fact that I could only see the feet made it feel more alarming. After the class, the mate sitting at the trouble seat came to me. "Why did you keep looking at me during the class? Why, do you fancy me?" I wanted to tell her what I saw, but didn't really know how to put it until lunchtime came. I was sitting among other girls, chit-chatting away, but I couldn't concentrate on any of that because I was keep observing the mystery feet. No, actually by then, full legs. They were clad in a skirt, clearly our school uniform.
Hey, what are you staring at? Did you hear what I said?
A friend asked.
Oh, sorry, it's just...
I said.
Just what? You look like you saw a ghost or something.
Well, actually, I do. My close friend already knew about my third eye, and the ghost, as if she heard me mentioning her, slowly revealed herself. Her neck was bent to her side, and her focusless, dead eyes. My friend saw my face going frozen and took me to the hallway to ask me in private, What kind of ghosts are you talking about? She said. A girl who hung herself, I said, still eyeing on the ghost through the window. So that's why everybody sitting there get achy shoulder? And, can you get rid of it? My friend thought I was some sort of exorcist. Sometimes I could communicate with a spirit, but that's about it. After school, I stayed behind in the classroom and tried sitting on the seat. Almost right away, my shoulder ached with something pressing down.
I don't wanna die,
I heard a ghost saying, squeezed out voice full of pain. I felt for her, but what could I do? It wasn't that I could take her down either. I understand you are suffering, but it's all over now. Let go of your regret and move on, was all I could tell her. I don't know if she was keep trying to save herself by stepping on whoever was sitting underneath, or simply trying to looking for somebody who would recognize her. After that short encounter, the ghost stopped manifesting in my classroom. But sadly, she didn't move on either, because in the following year, I saw her again, this time hanging in the toilet cubicle. "6 years ago, I was 14. That summer, my bestie died. He went to a valley upstream and swept up by the much deeper and wilder water than usual after a heavy summer rain. At the time, I had a lot of troubles, both at home and at school. I suffered deep depression and insomnia, and my bestie was really the only person who understood and emotionally supported me. Having now lost him by a tragic accident, I felt I had nothing to anchor me down in this life anymore. I didn't want to suffer anymore. So, one late summer night, I twined a few wire clothes hanger and hung myself. After the initial pain, I got lightheaded, and I think I passed out. When I opened my eyes the next, I found myself on an empty field full of mist. Was I dead, I wondered? Then I heard a laughter and turned to look. There was my bestie, smiling at me.
"Oi, mate, look at yourself,"
he said. I was just so stunned to know what to respond.
"Wouldn't you have to live twice harder and more for my sake? And fulfill your dream?"
he said, and started to untangle wire hangers from my throat one by one.
"Live to the full, and let us meet again after that, all right?"
All I could do was just to nod. He playfully slapped the back of my head as he used to. And that moment, I woke up, sprawled over the floor, and around me were the untangled hangers scattered. Hey, buddy. I was too stunned at the moment to thank you, but thank you. Now I'm not so young and foolish anymore. And yeah, just as you told me, I'm going to live twice as full and fulfill my dreams for us both. And then, We'll meet again, I believe. Love you and miss you. Son of a bitch. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you, learned something from today's stories. I have had my share of moments of broken heart and depression, though I can't say I ever experienced truly devastating or hopeless situation. But one notion I've always kept in my mind, and it helped me to get through, was that the main obligation and purpose of any life is certainly not a success, or not even happiness, but to live. If you enjoyed my work, give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters enjoy an early access to my new content. Thank you. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.